Imagine this. A swirling light, unnatural, enormous, rips across the Arctic sky like a wound torn open by something unseen. It turns impossibly perfect, forming a glowing spiral as if the heavens themselves are rotating. Its blue-white brilliance doesn't flicker like a star. It pulses like a message. Beneath it, silence consumes the mountains. Eyes stare upward in fear and awe. Hearts stop, and a question forms in the minds of thousands. What did we just witness? And more terrifying still, what else happened while we were looking up? Don't forget to like and share this story with your friends or closest family members to help spread awareness and caution through storytelling. Now, let's continue with the story. The morning of December 9th, 2009 began like any other in the frozen valley of Frostvale, a secluded village surrounded by dense, snow-covered pines, tucked between jagged ridges, where houses crouched low against the cold. There were no traffic lights here, no tourists, no stories that ever reached beyond the region. Until that day, at precisely 6:48 in the morning, a tremble began beneath the ground. Not an earthquake, but a vibration that hummed through walls and skin. People awoke gasping, confused, some falling from their beds. Windows rattled, and a strange sensation bloomed in the chest, as if the heartbeat no longer belonged to the person but to the earth itself. Livestock kicked down fences. A schoolteacher, Else Johansson, stepped outside and immediately vomited without knowing why. In the treetops, a pale blue mist had gathered, swirling slowly as though moved by something deep and ancient. There was no wind, no sound, just the hum and the mist, and a sky that had begun to change. 20 minutes later, in Tromsø and towns across northern Norway, a spiral of glowing light appeared in the sky, stretching wider than anything natural should. The world looked up. Phones came out. News helicopters were scrambled. The spiral became a global phenomenon within hours. But in Frostvale, no one saw the sky. They were too busy watching their compasses spin in place. At 7:11, the hum stopped. The mist began to fall like soft blue snow, vanishing before it touched the ground. Radios buzzed and died. A local weather station went offline, returning 2 minutes later with all its logs mysteriously rewritten with times that had not yet occurred. Retired geophysicist Anja Michaelbust had been monitoring the magnetic fields from her shed behind the house. What she recorded didn't make sense. The readings showed a localized spike in magnetism, followed by a near-total absence, as if the Earth's natural forces had shut off for just under a minute. Later that day, the national news would play looped footage of the spiral over Tromsø. Theories flew: missiles, wormholes, solar phenomena. Some claimed it was a failed Russian weapon test. Others whispered of something far stranger. No one spoke of Frostvale, except those who lived there, and they knew something else had happened. That night, the military arrived. Unmarked helicopters flew low, their blades cutting silently through the freezing air. Frostvale single road in and out was closed. No explanation was given, no permission asked. Dark-clad figures moved through the forest in tight formation, ignoring the villagers as though they weren't even there. By morning, they were gone. But something had changed. In the northeastern stretch of forest, a patch the villagers would come to call the Blue Hollow, no snow had fallen. The air was warmer, and the trees stood twisted, not bent by wind or snow, but spiraled, warped unnaturally as though pulled by an invisible hand. No birds returned, no insects buzzed, and when a group of boys entered the hollow 2 days later, only one came back. The boy would not speak for weeks, and when he did, he said only one thing: "There's something underneath." The village of Frostvale did not sleep for days. In homes lit by oil lamps and flickering radios, whispers replaced conversation. Fathers kept rifles close by. Mothers watched their children with unease. The quiet of the Arctic, usually comforting, now felt like it was holding its breath. The boy who returned from the hollow, Lars, had deep scratches down his arms. Not from branches, not from claws. The wounds were too straight, too deliberate, as though something had marked him. In his sleep, he murmured strange sounds that weren't Norwegian, weren't anything at all, just guttural fragments of something lost. Dr. Anja Michaelbust took it upon herself to investigate. She was not a woman driven by fantasy. Her life had been spent among seismographs and charts, decoding the quiet language of tectonics. But what happened that day? The harmonic resonance of the hum, the magnetic interruption, the biological distress, did not belong to her science. She strapped on snow boots, packed her oldest magnetometer, and walked into the blue hollow alone. The first thing she noticed was silence. Even in the stillest winter, there were always sounds. Creaking trees, wings overhead, the crunch of snow. But inside the hollow, there was none. Her own footsteps seemed absorbed by the ground. The air itself felt thick, like walking through water. Her compass spun wildly. Her magnetometer chirped and died, then flared back to life with unreadable data. She took a step deeper. The trees, though seemingly alive, did not grow naturally. Their trunks twisted in symmetrical spirals. The bark had been stripped in narrow ribbons. No fungi, no moss, not even rot, as if nature had been paused, confused by this one patch of earth. She found the center by accident. A perfect circle, about 12 meters wide, free of trees. The snow within had melted into icy slush, steaming gently in the sub-zero air. At its center was a hole, no wider than a manhole cover, and impossibly dark. No wind emerged, no smell, just absence. Anya knelt beside it, listening. No sound. Then she lowered the microphone of her field recorder. That night, she reviewed the audio. Most of it was silence, but at the 24-second mark, a sound emerged. Not a voice, not a machine. A vibration, low and rhythmic, pulsing every 6 seconds, like breathing, or waiting. She played it again, then again, and she could not sleep that night. Word of the recording spread through Frostvale in whispers. A few of the older villagers began to speak of old stories, things told only in the darkest winters. Stories of the Jupit, the deep, something beneath the ice that was never meant to be disturbed. But no one listened to old stories anymore. At least, not until the dreams began. In the following days, half the village reported waking up, gasping from nightmares. Always the same, standing in the hollow, surrounded by twisted trees. Something humming below, something enormous, watching from beneath. Even those who had never been there dreamed of the hole. Then came the second incident. A forestry drone sent to survey tree damage above the hollow vanished off radar. Its last image transmitted showed a brief flash of light, perfectly circular, rising out of the mist. The file corrupted seconds later. The forestry agency claimed battery failure, but the local drone operator, Eric Nilsson, was unconvinced. He visited the hollow the next day. Alone, he never returned. His snowmobile was found a kilometer away, still idling. His gear scattered, his gloves left behind in the snow. But no tracks led away. Only a long, narrow impression, like something had been dragged downward. Frostvale had begun to fracture. Some villagers packed up and left. Others huddled together in fear, praying for the first time in years. And then there were those who became obsessed, watching the sky, the compasses, the soil. They believed something had awakened, that the spiral in the sky had not been a weapon or an accident, but a signal, a message meant for whatever was waiting beneath. And it had heard. The days grew colder, but Frostvale no longer felt like part of Norway. It was as if the village had slipped slightly into a version of itself that did not align with the rest of the world. Clocks began to drift. Devices reset randomly. Cell phone footage taken within the hollow came out distorted. Figures blurred, colors warped, and audio laced with static resembling whispering in a language no one could identify. Children stopped sleeping through the night. Several began sleepwalking, always heading toward the direction of the blue hollow. One girl was found at dawn standing at the tree line, barefoot in the snow, eyes wide open, whispering the words, "We are beneath," over and over, as though caught in a loop. The villagers began locking their doors, not out of fear of outsiders, but of each other. Anya continued her study. With Lars still mute, she turned to his sketchbook. The boy, once bright and imaginative, now filled page after page with strange, geometric spirals. They weren't decorative. They were calculated, precise angles, mirrored symmetry. When she cross-referenced one of the patterns with a polar mapping system, it aligned perfectly with the latitude lines converging near the North Magnetic Pole. It wasn't art. It was directional. She contacted a colleague from Oslo, Professor Henrik Volume 50, a physicist who had dabbled in fringe geomagnetic theory. When he saw the sketches, he agreed to come at once. He arrived by train 2 days later, but he was not alone. 2 unknown men in dark coats were seen observing him closely at the station and again in the village square. Val's behavior shifted immediately. He met with Anya in private, appearing pale and agitated. His voice barely rose above a whisper as he spoke. "Your boy's sketches," he said. "They mirror patterns found in certain deep-sea sonar scans. Not public scans. Military grade. Subduction zones. But this," he pointed to the spiral, "this shape, it shouldn't appear on land. And yet here it is." Anya showed him the recording of the hole. He listened, face unreadable, until he reached the 24-second mark. Then he removed his headphones and calmly said, "Stop digging. Whatever is down there was buried for a reason." But Anya had already gone too far. 3 nights later, the hum returned. It began just after midnight. Not loud, but enough to shake picture frames, rattle bedposts, set dogs barking. It seemed to come from the soil itself, traveling like a low wave through everything. Anya's seismometer picked up nothing, but her magnetometer, it bent. Literally, the needle arched sideways, pulling against the glass as though drawn by a powerful magnetic source beneath her feet. She switched to backup instruments. All readouts showed something impossible. The Earth's magnetic field in Frostvale had reversed for exactly 43 seconds. That same night, several residents reported waking in different rooms than where they had fallen asleep. One man found himself outside on the porch with no memory of how he got there. A woman woke standing in her bathtub, arms at her sides, as if she had been placed there. Timepieces lost entire hours. A freezer filled with meat thawed despite still being plugged in. And near the hollow, the trees had changed again. Instead of twisting further, they were leaning inward now, toward the hole, as though pulled by some unseen gravity. At dawn, the sky above Frostvale shimmered. A faint auroral corona appeared, unnatural in its position, directly over the blue hollow. But instead of green or violet, the corona was white and pulsed like a beating heart. The villagers who saw it said it was beautiful, then terrifying. Some wept. Others fell to their knees. The signal was no longer faint. It was growing stronger. Anya met with Volume 50 again that evening. He was packing to leave. She begged him to stay, to help her uncover what was happening. But he only shook his head. "You don't understand," he said. "This isn't an anomaly. This is an anchor, something meant to remain fixed. And if it lifts..." He paused. "We won't recognize what replaces us." He left that night and was never heard from again. The next morning, the hole in the hollow had grown. It was no longer a circle the size of a manhole. It was a crater, wide enough for a truck to fall through. The blue mist had returned, rising gently from its depths, and at the edge, written into the ice, were symbols no one in Frostvale had ever seen before. But Lars had already drawn them. Days ago, the villagers gathered around the hollow at dawn, drawn by a mixture of fear, fascination, and something less explainable, a pull they couldn't resist. No one had summoned them. No message was sent. Yet there they stood, bundled in coats and scarves, staring into a pit that breathed mist like steam rising from a slumbering thing. It had grown overnight. The edges had collapsed further inward, revealing a ring of stone embedded deep in the earth, carved in precise geometric patterns. These were not made by nature, nor by time. They were placed, and at the very bottom, partially veiled by the blue haze, stood a staircase, made of some obsidian-like material. The staircase spiraled downward into the dark. It hadn't been there before. Anya arrived last, winded and wide-eyed, a flashlight strapped to her chest, notebooks under her arm. She studied the crater's new formation in silence. Then she looked at Lars. The boy was already watching her. He nodded once. By midday, a team of 4 was assembled. Anya, desperate for answers. Father Olav, the village priest, who believed this was the test of prophecy. Mikkel, a reindeer herder and former spelunker, skilled in tight, dark places. And Rune, a cynical technician from the local power station, who brought the best equipment and the worst attitude. They carried ropes, GPS devices, air monitors, headlamps, and food. Mikkel insisted on a flare gun. Olaf brought a rosary. Anya, 2 notebooks and an audio recorder. Rune, a crowbar, just in case physics breaks. The air at the rim of the hollow felt heavier, sound muffled, like being underwater. As Anya stepped onto the first stair, her flashlight flickered. So did everyone else's. Interference, Rune muttered. Or warning, said Olaf. They descended. The staircase spiraled down in perfect symmetry. Each step was untouched by weather, slick with condensation. Symbols lined the walls, the same ones Lars had drawn in his frenzied sketches. They passed hundreds as they descended, none repeating, each one glowing faintly as they drew near. After 10 minutes, the mist began to thin, and they stepped into a chamber, oval, vast, and utterly silent. Its walls shimmered with some mineral neither Anya nor Rune could identify. It wasn't rock, but something layered, metallic yet soft, like the inside of a seashell. In the center was a monolith, a towering column reaching from floor to ceiling, etched entirely in the same spiraling patterns. The monolith pulsed once as they approached. Mikkel raised the flare gun, eyes wide. "Don't," Anya whispered. The pulse came again. Olaf fell to his knees and began to weep, whispering ancient prayers in a voice he didn't recognize as his own. Rune's GPS read coordinates from the Pacific Ocean. Anya turned on the audio recorder. The microphone picked up a sound the human ear couldn't register, a subsonic tone, so low it made their vision blur. When she adjusted the gain, the sound became clearer, not music, but structure, a signal with layers, rhythm, recursion, a code. It was broadcasting from beneath the earth. Suddenly, the monolith reacted. A ripple passed through its surface. The symbols on its body shifted, rearranging in real time, forming a new sequence, one Anya instantly recognized. Lars's final drawing, the same spiral. Then came a voice, not through the air, but through the skull, a pressure behind the eyes. It spoke in no language, yet they all understood. Each heard something different. For Anya, you broke the seal. For Rune, you live on borrowed matter. For Mikkel, you have touched the roots. For Olaf, faith is a poor translation. They staggered. Mikkel screamed and fired the flare. The spark vanished before it left the barrel. Rune smashed the monolith with the crowbar. The crowbar bent like rubber. No impact. No resistance. Then the monolith split open. No explosion. No sound. It peeled back, like petals of black metal revealing a void inside, darker than shadow, deeper than perception. Looking into it made the mind stutter. Some absence of dimension, a geometry the brain refused to understand. And from within the void came something, not light, but memory. Each of them was flooded with visions, not of their own pasts, but someone else's. Fires beneath oceans, towers reaching into black skies, a civilization of vast minds and no bodies, a collapse not caused by war, but displacement, an experiment buried beneath the earth to contain the breach between what is real and what is allowed. Then silence. When they awoke, they were back at the rim of the hollow. No chamber, no staircase, only the blue mist, rising. But something had followed them back. The 4 explorers returned to Frostvale in silence. Their clothes were damp, their gear ruined by exposure to something that had no measurable properties. The GPS units displayed false coordinates. The audio recorder would no longer play. And the crowbar, Rune's pride, now bent in a spiral and cold to the touch, as if it had absorbed something that refused to let go. But the most disturbing thing wasn't what they carried back. It was what came with them. They didn't speak of the voice, not out loud, but they each heard it now, not as an external sound, but as a thread woven through thought, like a background hum in the mind. Sometimes words, sometimes images, always waiting. That night, Lars went missing. He was last seen standing at the window of the community center, where he had been staying, staring at the snow-covered forest beyond. The staff thought nothing of it, until morning, when they found the room empty. No footprints led away from the door. No broken glass. Only one thing was left behind, a drawing on the wall. scratched into the wood with something sharp. A perfect spiral. But this spiral was inverted, and around it were three figures. Identical. Tall. Faceless. Watching. Anya, disturbed and half delirious from what she'd seen in the hollow, began examining her own brainwaves using old neuroimaging tools she had left from a sleep study. The results stunned her. She was producing gamma activity even while at rest, the kind usually only found in deep meditation or hyperactive neural states. She ran the same test on Rune and Mikkel. Same result. All of them were experiencing brain activity far beyond normal levels. But there was a pattern in the spikes, a recurring signal in the waveforms, like an embedded carrier tone. Not random, not organic. A broadcast. Something encoded itself into us, Rune said grim. We didn't just find a monolith. It used us. Olav, meanwhile, had retreated into the church, refusing to speak with anyone. He tore the crosses from the walls, burned every book in the rectory except one, a tattered Norse manuscript of ancient origin that spoke of a cavern of reversal, a place where the sky and ground traded voices, and those without form would return to echo. The villagers grew more erratic in the following days. Fire started and went unexplained. Electricity pulsed at random. Street lights dimmed whenever someone passed beneath them. Radios played voices that weren't in any language, just breath-like tones, laced with static that pulsed in time with the Earth's magnetic field. And then the animals began to die. Not violently, not messily. They were found frozen solid, eyes open, as if something had erased their motion. Entire flocks of birds dropped mid-flight, forming geometric patterns in the snow. Dogs refused to leave their shelters, howling at nothing until their voices went hoarse. Still, no help came. Weather reports showed nothing. Satellite images of the region became corrupted, glitching in the exact coordinates of Frostvale. A local helicopter pilot who tried to leave for the nearest base station turned back after 20 minutes, claiming he had flown for hours and saw only cloud and sea, even though he should have reached land long ago. We've been cut off, Rune said. Not just from Norway, Anya replied. From everything. Then came the return of Lars. He appeared one evening at the edge of the village square, barefoot, silent. Standing beside him were the three figures from his drawing. Tall, motionless, indistinct. No one saw them arrive. They were not made of flesh, nor light, nor shadow, but they were there, and everyone felt them. Even those who remained inside, behind curtains and locked doors, began to tremble, a physiological response to something primal, the feeling of being watched by a presence that does not recognize you as real. Then Lars spoke. One word. He hadn't spoken in weeks, but now his voice was calm, steady, and wrong. He said, awakened. The figures turned as one and began to walk, no sound, no motion beneath their feet, straight toward the hollow. Lars followed. Anya, Mikkel, and Rune gave chase, knowing something final had begun. Olav met them at the edge of the forest, gripping the old manuscript. They are not gods, he said, trembling. They are not devils. They are reminders. Reminders of what? Rune hissed, but Olav's eyes were empty now. They were here before us, before thought, before matter, and now they're remembering. At the hollow, the mist had vanished. The hole was now a shaft of light, descending so far it looked like it pierced the crust of the earth. The three beings stood at its edge, facing inward, and from the pit, a sound rose. Not a hum, not a voice, but a name. One that none of them knew, and yet all remembered. Then Lars stepped forward, and jumped. The scream never came. Lars fell into the light, but no impact followed. No echo, no thud. He simply disappeared, as if swallowed by time, not space. The shaft pulsed once, as though reacting to his presence, and then the air shifted. The wind died. The clouds parted in perfect concentric rings above Frostvale, and the earth, for a fraction of a moment, felt still, like the breath of the world had paused in anticipation. Anya fell to her knees. Something had opened. Back in the village, the effects were immediate. Clock stopped. The auroral corona returned, but now it flickered in unnatural colors, reds that seemed too deep, greens that hurt the eyes. A low-frequency vibration could be felt in bones, not heard in ears. Every screen, phones, TVs, even powered-off monitors, glowed faintly with an internal shimmer. Rune's instruments went wild. Radiation levels dropped to zero, then spiked to levels that should have triggered burns. Yet no one felt pain. GPS coordinates now looped endlessly across 3 locations: Frostvale, the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, and the Vostok subglacial lake in Antarctica. Anya made a chilling connection. "These are anchor points," she said. "Whatever we've uncovered, it exists at all 3 places simultaneously." "Then what's happening here?" Mikkel asked. "Is happening everywhere?" "No," she whispered. "It's starting here." They returned to the hollow. Though it no longer resembled anything man-made or natural, the hole had become a perfect column of liquid light, suspended between air and earth. Around its rim, snow had melted in exact geometric patterns. The spiral symbols now extended outward into the forest, burned into bark, etched across frozen rivers. Nature was being rewritten, and the 3 beings? Gone, vanished without trace. Only impressions remained, faint distortions in the air, like heat rising off asphalt. If you stared long enough, you could still see their outlines shimmering, as if they had only just stepped between seconds. But the worst was still to come. That night, the sky cracked. Not physically, not astronomically, but perceptually. Stars blinked in and out of alignment. Constellations twisted. What once was Polaris now spun in place, splitting into 2, then 3. Frostvale's night became drenched in unfamiliar light, and from above, something descended. Not a ship, not a creature, a field. It began as a shimmer, stretching horizon to horizon, a membrane of translucent matter, slowly lowering itself upon the village like a second atmosphere. Where it touched treetops, the bark fossilized instantly. Birds caught mid-flight turned to glass and shattered before hitting the ground. Rune described it as an event boundary. "A veil," he said. "We're being separated." "From what?" Mikkel asked. Rune didn't answer, because he no longer recognized his own reflection in the ice. Inside homes, people began to change. Not physically at first, but emotionally, mentally. Memories began blending. Names were forgotten, then remembered with wrong faces. Families turned on one another in confusion. People insisted the streets were in the wrong order. Maps didn't match the ground. One woman, Maria On, swore her son had never been born, even though others remembered him clearly. His belongings were still in their home, his drawing still on the fridge, but she looked into his eyes and screamed, "You're not him." He disappeared that night, not ran away, disappeared, like a hole had been punched through the fabric of his reality, and more followed. Anya kept notes. Pages filled faster than she could make sense of them. All around her, the world was shifting, slipping into something adjacent, the kind of wrong that couldn't be seen, only felt. She dreamt of cities upside down, of oceans that sang, of languages made of shadow, and each morning, more and more of those dreams felt like memories. Then came the mirror rains. For 11 minutes, a gentle rain fell over Frostvale, but the droplets didn't behave like water. They fell upward, refracted light incorrectly, and left behind small reflective orbs across every surface, as if the village had been coated in shattered lenses. People began seeing themselves, but not as they were. Reflections showed alternate lives, different clothing, missing scars. Some smiled at their observers, others bled from their eyes. One man watched his reflection scream and beat its fists against the inside of the mirror while he stood frozen. These orbs dissolved by sunrise, but the psychological damage remained. At the epicenter of it all, the hollow remained unchanged. Lars was still gone, but Anya, in her altered state of hyperperception, could still feel him, not below, not above, but woven into the space around her, as though he had been transcribed into the geometry of the anomaly. "I don't think he fell," she whispered to Rune. "I think he was downloaded." Rune said nothing, because he now saw symbols moving beneath Anya's skin. The boundary field, the veil, continued descending, and soon, the stars above could no longer be seen. Only a single white eye, flickering where the sky had been, and all around the village, in the farthest corners of the forest, the sound of digging began, but no one was holding the tools. At first, the digging was distant, a soft, rhythmic scrape beneath the snow, like animals burrowing through ice. But over the next 2 nights, the sounds grew louder, more coordinated. It wasn't chaotic. It was deliberate, intelligent, and worst of all, it was getting closer. By the 3rd morning, cracks had formed in the roads leading into Frostvale. The villagers, or what was left of them, dared not approach. The gaps weren't natural. Their edges were angled, as though etched with industrial precision. Steam rose from them, carrying the faint scent of copper and something sweeter, like scorched honey. Rune dropped a thermal sensor into one of the fractures. The temperature reading was impossible. -200 degrees, and climbing. "It's not a cold," he whispered. "It's an inversion. Something down there is reversing entropy." Anya didn't speak. Her eyes were focused on the far ridge, where movement caught her attention. Something was emerging from the forest. It wasn't human. The creature was tall and skeletal, covered in skin that shimmered like water over stone. Its limbs were too long, bending in places where no joint should exist. Its head was a featureless oval, no eyes, no mouth, only a slick surface that reflected the watcher with terrible clarity. But it wasn't alone. From behind trees and beneath snowdrifts, more came. Not marching, not charging, but moving in sync, like one organism across many bodies. Silent, measured, absolute. The villagers screamed and scattered. Guns were fired. Nothing slowed them. When bullets struck, the creatures split like liquid, then reformed. One of them passed through a steel fence without resistance. Another stepped through a man-like mist, leaving him frozen stiff in place, wide-eyed. Heart stopped mid-beat. "They're not attacking," Anya gasped. "They're calibrating." In the church basement, Father Olaf translated the final pages of the ancient manuscript. It wasn't religious. It was architectural. Instructions for a design buried beneath the earth. A sleeping lattice, wrapped in soil and time, designed to hold something outside of time. A precaution. A fail-safe. But the design was incomplete. Olaf's trembling finger traced the final sentence aloud. "When the eye opens, so too shall the memory of stone walk again." He looked up, eyes hollow. "They're not here for war," he said. "They're here to wake the structure." Rune and Anya stood outside, watching the creatures gather around the hollow. Not entering, surrounding, as if forming a perimeter. A ritual. Each creature raised a hand. Not upward, not downward, inward, toward the hollow's column of light, which had begun to fold, not collapse, but warp inward, like a tunnel turning on itself. Anya felt it in her blood, a spiraling pressure, tugging at her bones like magnetism tuned to her very molecules. Then it stopped. Everything. The light, the sound, the sky. Time froze for 9 seconds. Birds mid-flight hung in the air. Flames flickering in fireplaces ceased to move. The wind halted, and in that silence, something rose from the hollow. It wasn't a being. It wasn't a machine. It was a shape. A construct of impossible geometry, its surfaces folding in directions the human brain couldn't fully track. It hovered above the pit, spinning slowly, casting no shadow. Its color changed depending on who looked at it. To Anya, it was bone white. To Rune, it was violet flame. To Olaf, it appeared as polished obsidian. But all 3 of them heard the same word in their minds. Archive. The villagers fell to their knees. Those who had not fled began to weep, or laugh, or scream, some experiencing visions, others convulsing in spasms of memory not their own. They saw ancient deserts filled with structures taller than mountains, machines woven into forests, creatures teaching clouds how to speak. And then they saw the shattering. The archive spun once. Then a voice, not sound, not thought, but imprint spoke. Not to everyone. To Anya. "You opened the gate. You were the spiral. Now you must remember what you are." Anya dropped to the snow, because in that moment she did. She saw herself, standing among them. Not the creatures, not the villagers, but the architects. Not human, not even organic, but ancient, crystalline minds that walked through dimensions like corridors. Her memory, locked away until now, showed her constructing the fail-safe lattice beneath Earth's crust. a guardian system designed to hold the archive until the world was ready to witness again. Anya was a part of that system, a shard of a greater self, hidden in human form, placed inside time to watch, wait, and protect the memory. And she had just reactivated. Rune tried to speak, but his voice was static. Mikkel stumbled toward her, eyes black with spirals, muttering code in a forgotten dialect. The air grew heavy, thick with radiation that did not burn, but cleansed, as if stripping away lies, as if reality were an infection being burned out cell by cell. The archive descended toward the forest floor. Its purpose was beginning. The creatures bowed, and all around them, the earth opened its mouth, not in cracks or quakes, but in formation. Massive shapes rising from below the soil, once part of the planet's skeleton, now forming towers of latticework and humming stone. What had looked like hills and ridges were now revealed as fragments of an ancient machine world, hidden beneath Frostvale for eons. Lights activated deep underground, pulsing in sequence. A global system awakening, and the archive's message continued. You are not the first cycle. You are not the final error, but you may be the last correction. The veil overhead shimmered, and above it, now clearly visible, was not the sky, but a reflection of another Earth, an inverted one, where cities drifted like icebergs in crimson oceans, and a second hollow yawned in perfect symmetry with the one below. Two worlds, about to touch. Imagine your world, your thoughts, your family, your past, suspended like a droplet just before falling. And then, imagine realizing you were never on the outside of the drop, but trapped inside its membrane, one heartbeat away from being turned inside out. That's what Frostvale had become. The air vibrated with purpose. Above, the reflection of the inverted earth pulsed in rhythm with the real one. Its ocean swirled in reverse, its mountains hung from clouds, and in the same location as Frostvale, a second village shimmered upside down, mirror-perfect in layout, but wrong in feeling. Dead trees, bent spires, a sky that bled horizontal light, and from the hollow, the archive began to rise again. The object had stabilized, no longer shifting form. It now appeared as a great wheel inscribed with countless spirals, some moving independently, others locked in patterns that throbbed with memory. Anya stood closest, skin now veined with luminous markings. She wasn't fully human anymore, not by perception, not by presence. Rune could barely keep his eyes on her. Looking at her too long gave him vertigo, like trying to read a book in a dream. But it wasn't just Anya. The villagers were changing. Those who had witnessed the mirror rains, those who had seen the spiral eye above the sky, were slowly transforming, not in flesh, but in identity. They moved like they were remembering lives that didn't belong to them. They spoke in languages no one taught them. They started drawing structures no human civilization had ever constructed. And they all spoke of the same thing. The gate. Beneath Frostvale, the earth groaned. The land opened, revealing vast corridors of fossilized machinery, all leading downward into a hidden geometry. A pit not made by force, but invitation. Lights shimmered along the walls, scanning every movement, adapting to each being that approached. The archive floated above the center of this pit, like a key waiting for a lock. And the creatures, tall, flowing, mirror-bodied, began arranging themselves along the spiral lines etched in the snow. The formation was ritualistic, ancient, and methodical. Father Olav, watching from the church tower, whispered the old words. The veil has thinned. The worlds are aligning. The second gate opens only once. Mikkel turned to Rune, hands shaking. We're about to merge with something not of our universe. Then a terrible sound, like metal being bent inside a cathedral. The hollow pulsed and a fracture appeared in the sky. Not a crack, but a wound. Reality tore open like silk, and through it poured reversed light. Cold that burned, sound that healed, shadows that glowed. The villagers fell to their knees. Above them, descending from the mirrored earth, came a structure shaped like a crown made of orbiting monoliths, stone and light locked together, moving with impossible precision. It hovered over the real hollow, connecting to it with a line of dark energy. Two halves of the gate were aligning, and Anya stepped forward. She turned to the villagers, what remained of them. I remember now. I was sent to protect this world from activation before it was ready. We were once gatekeepers, scattered through the stars, embedded in time like seeds. Rune trembled, and now, Anya closed her eyes. Now the gate opens, with or without us. The archive began to descend into the pit. The creatures, the architects, the engineers of whatever existed before human memory, raised their arms. The sky grew white, the stars inverted, and the gate connected. A massive tremor hit Frostvale. But it wasn't an earthquake. It was a synchronization. Both Earths, real and inverted, became synchronized for exactly 12 minutes and 19 seconds. Every living being on both sides shared the same moment in time. People on Earth Prime began having visions of their mirrored selves. Some were murderers, some were saints, others were extinct. In Frostvale, everyone could see their own alternate lives, walking just beyond the veil. One child screamed as his reflection turned and ran in the opposite direction, vanishing into the trees, leaving behind only his own footprints in the snow. Rune collapsed, clutching his chest. I just saw myself, but I wasn't human. Anya didn't answer. She was levitating now. Her feet no longer touched the ground, her voice echoing in tones layered like a choir. I am the last key. Beneath her, the pit ignited. A beam of pale fire erupted from the hollow, hitting the inverted gate above. The energy spiraled upward like a reverse tornado, and then time itself began to behave differently. Some birds flew backward. Children aged 10 years in seconds, then reverted. Mountains folded in on themselves and reassembled. Language broke down, letters curling into runes that floated between sentences. Screens flickered with equations not yet discovered. People whispered memories of wars that had never happened, of stars that had not yet formed. Reality was bleeding across the veil, and through it all, the archive spoke its final phrase: cross now, or vanish forever. And then the inversion began. A column of white light formed between the two Earths. People began to rise into it, not dead, not abducted, but translated. Their bodies folded neatly into spiral strands of light and were absorbed. Rune watched as Olav was lifted, then Mikkel, then the creatures themselves disassembled, their work complete, fading into the membrane as living code. Anya turned to Rune. This is your choice. You can stay and forget, or come and become what you were always meant to be. Rune stepped forward. The light surrounded him, and Frostvale was no longer part of Earth. Above, the spiral eye closed. The mirrored Earth faded, leaving only stars. Below, the hollow was gone. Only smooth ground remained, as though nothing had ever been built there. The village would be found empty. No signs of struggle, no records of evacuation, just silence, and a soft, circular imprint in the snow. Imagine a place that once was, and then wasn't. A location erased not by fire or time, but by intent. Frostvale no longer appeared on satellite maps. The roads leading to it looped endlessly into forests that didn't exist the day before. Search drones lost signal midair. Compass needles spun in lazy spirals, mocking direction. And still some remembered. A low whisper in the memory of old men. A spiral carved in a child's sketch. A missing file on government records that should be there. Frostvale was gone, but the question of Frostvale had just begun. Don't forget to like and share this story with your friends or closest family members to help spread awareness and caution through storytelling. Now, let's continue with the story. Weeks later, a small Norwegian geological team, led by Dr. Selma Verk, was dispatched to investigate the anomalies in the Trondelag region. Not to find Frostvale, officially. It had never existed, but to follow up on unusual tectonic readings and persistent magnetic interference. What they found was impossible. The landscape was pristine. No footprints, no ruins, no sign of any human settlement ever having been there. Yet beneath the snow lay patterns. Perfect concentric spirals pressed faintly into the soil as if the land had been scanned. Not built on, not damaged, but surveyed. They dug. 7 meters down, they found glass. Not man-made, not naturally formed. Glass with embedded lattices that shifted under light. The material bent their equipment signals, distorted time measurements, and pulsed when exposed to sound frequencies from human voices. One in turn fainted simply from standing on it too long. Another began speaking in syllables no one could translate. Selma documented everything. Her final log entry was frantic. "I believe something is still listening." That was the last message before her team vanished. No signs of struggle, no distress signals. Their base camp was found untouched, meals still warm, instruments mid-calibration. Every camera failed during the exact same 11-second window at 3:17 a.m. The only clue: a single spiral drawn in frost on the inside of a tent flap. Meanwhile, in Oslo, Rune's apartment was empty. Authorities marked him as a missing person. His files had been deleted from most databases, but fragments remained on analog paper, journal entries, weather notes, and one black and white photograph he took years before his disappearance. The photo was grainy, but it showed a column of light piercing the Arctic sky, spiraling like a ribbon into the heavens. It had no timestamp, no location tag, only a handwritten note on the back: "When the veil thins again, follow the spiral." Across the world, similar symbols began to appear. Crop circles in Sweden shaped like twisted helixes. Cave paintings in Indonesia suddenly glowing faintly with ultraviolet light. An audio file from a deep-sea microphone in the Mariana Trench emitted a frequency identical to a tone once heard during the Frostvale event, a tone now known as the spiral key. Governments formed private research groups. The Vatican issued no comment, but quietly sealed off catacombs that held spiral mosaics previously believed to be decorative. Several whistleblowers claimed their dreams were being monitored. A new term entered the global conspiracy lexicon: the spiral event. And still, no one could explain the mirror rain, or why the hollow, recorded on a single leaked drone video, never cast a shadow, or how multiple patients in psychiatric facilities across 6 countries began painting the exact same rotating lattice with no knowledge of one another. They all repeated the same phrase, over and over: "The archive saw me." Some scientists argued it was a mass delusion triggered by geomagnetic pulses or a psychological resonance field. Others believed a micro-black hole had briefly touched Earth, erasing the town and altering those nearby. But a small group, working in secret, began piecing the fragments together. Radio logs, coded glyphs, recovered sketches from Rune's journal. They believed Anya had succeeded in opening the gate. And now, Earth was slowly sinking. In a quiet apartment in Prague, a young woman woke from a deep sleep and walked to her window. Her name was Klara. She had never heard of Frostvale. She lived an ordinary life. But last night, she dreamed of a sky with 2 moons, of structures made of language, of beings without faces, whispering in light. And when she looked down at her hand, she saw the spiral mark, pale, faint, glowing, like it had always been there. Elsewhere, in the woods of Trondelag, a hunter noticed something strange. He'd taken the same path for 20 years. But today, the trees had shifted. The snow fell different, as if the ground beneath his feet was thinner. Then he saw it faint at the edge of the forest. A girl, maybe 10 years old, wearing no shoes, staring at him with eyes that reflected stars. He called out. She didn't answer. She simply raised one hand and pointed down, to the snow beneath them, to the spiral glowing through the frost. Imagine being pulled into a memory that isn't yours, but feeling every second of it as if you lived it. Imagine waking up with a name you don't recognize, speaking a language no one taught you, and remembering a village that was never mapped. Imagine realizing that what you thought was your dream was someone else's warning. Reality had cracked, and through that fracture, something had begun to replicate. Don't forget to like and share this story with your friends or closest family members to help spread awareness and caution through storytelling. Now, let's continue with the story. Klara wasn't alone. Across 12 nations, individuals with no history of mental illness began describing a near-identical phenomenon. A vivid dream of a cold village surrounded by a ring of trees that whispered in languages not yet spoken. The dreams were not symbolic. They were spatially consistent. They described Frostvale. They remembered the hollow. And they all had the spiral mark. Governments tried to quarantine the information, But recursion doesn't need networks. It spreads like thought, like instinct, like inheritance. Dr. Sander Rosvik, a fringe neurogeologist dismissed by most of the academic world, called it a recursion field. A recursion field is a self-repeating reality loop inserted into human cognition, he explained in a deleted conference recording. It's not a place. It's a pattern with purpose. His presentation featured a looping simulation, a spiral sequence of satellite data over Trondelag. Over 32 frames, the weather patterns formed a spiral almost identical to the one seen in the hollow. In the 33rd frame, the satellite malfunctioned. Rosvik was reported missing a week later. Meanwhile, deep within a military lab in Eastern Europe, recovered fragments from a spiral gate were being examined under extreme security. The fragments hummed at low frequency. They were indestructible. Cutting tools dulled instantly. When exposed to electromagnetic radiation, the pieces emitted pulses that scrambled all memory storage within a 20-meter radius. Human memory was also affected. 3 lab technicians had to be hospitalized after experiencing identity fragmentation. One technician, upon waking, only spoke in recursive phrases. I was the one watching me, watching him, watching her, watching us. The incident was classified, but the leak reached a group of independent researchers, former linguists, cryptographers, astronomers. They called themselves the Irregulars, and they had a new goal: find where the recursion ends. Back in Trondelag, the forest was changing. Animals were acting strange. Birds flew in circular migration paths, always returning to the center of the spiral. Insects clustered into fractal formations on the bark of trees. The soil itself vibrated at times, as if responding to footfall, and in the center of that forgotten forest, a door appeared. Not a physical one, a perceptual threshold. Only those who had dreamed of Frostvale could see it, and only those marked by the spiral could cross. Klara arrived there 3 days after the dream. She had followed nothing but intuition. No map, no GPS, just the echo of a place she'd never visited. As she stepped between 2 twisted birch trees, the world shimmered, and her breath fogged an air that suddenly dropped 10 degrees in temperature. The sounds of the forest went mute, and before her stood a village. Quiet, empty, snow-dusted. Frostvale, exactly as she had dreamed. The clock tower stood frozen at 3:17 a.m. She walked the streets, recognizing every house, every bend in the path. Her heart pounded. Her body knew this place like a ghost returning home. Then she saw the hollow. It was open again. The spiral stone around its rim pulsed with pale light. She stepped closer and heard voices. Not whispers, memories. They were encoded into the air itself, as if the village had become a vessel of thought. She heard Rune's last words, Anya's fragmented messages, even the laughter of children long gone. She reached into the hollow and was pulled inward, but she didn't fall. She spiraled, downward, inward, through layers of memory that were not bound by time. Faces from ancient eras, skies from dead planets, texts written in rotating alphabets, and at the center a throne of black glass, shifting, impossible, both present and becoming. And there was Anya, or what remained of her. She was radiant and unreadable, like a being paused mid-evolution. Klara, she said, you are the anchor. I don't understand, Klara replied, her voice floating in delay. You don't need to. You resonate. You didn't just dream the gate. You were part of the construction. Your DNA holds the final sequence. Klara shook her head. I'm nobody. Anya's eyes flickered, showing galaxies. No one is nobody once the recursion begins. She reached out, and a spiral of light etched itself into Klara's chest. The field activated. Across the world, those marked by the spiral felt a shift. Sudden awareness. Memories aligning into new configurations. Some fell to their knees in panic. Others wept with relief. A few simply disappeared, caught in transition. And in the lab where the spiral fragment was kept, the object exploded silently, unleashing a feedback pulse that knocked out power grids across 3 countries. Above Earth, for exactly 12 seconds, a new object appeared in orbit, rotating slowly, watching. It was not a satellite, and it cast no shadow. Frostvale had returned, but it was no longer a place. It was a recursion point, a repeating pattern in the very narrative of Earth, and Klara had just become its new anchor. Imagine realizing your thoughts are no longer your own. Imagine finding words in your journal written in your handwriting, but you don't remember writing them. Imagine hearing music playing from nowhere, notes that pull your emotions like tides. And with each sound, each word, each breath, the spiral grows clearer in your mind. It's not asking permission, it's updating you. The recursion wasn't a glitch, it was a protocol. Don't forget to like and share this story with your friends or closest family members to help spread awareness and caution through storytelling. Now, let's continue with the story. Klara's transformation wasn't physical. Her body remained unchanged. But internally, something had aligned. Her perception had widened, not in vision, but in dimension. She could now sense structural frequencies. Thoughts moved differently. Time felt layered. Every memory she'd ever had hovered just at the surface, accessible with the whisper of intention. More than that, she could hear others. Not voices, streams. Like thousands of minds broadcasting at low hums, fragments of dreams, half-formed regrets, quiet questions left unanswered. The world had become a sphere of recursion, and she stood at the convergence point. Outside Frostvale, time staggered. Governments had isolated the region, declaring it a geological hazard zone. The military established a cordon with silent authority, but even they couldn't enter the recursion field. Drones sent and returned warped or didn't return at all. Soldiers stationed nearby reported waking up in unfamiliar places, sometimes with days missing from their memories. Several scientists embedded in the operation reported identical nightmares. A spiral, a well, a door, a woman with galaxy eyes whispering. Resonance is alignment. You are not immune. They called it the Spiral Protocol, but no one knew what the protocol was supposed to do. In a hidden vault in Berlin, the irregulars decoded the last pages of Rune's journals, smuggled out by a whistleblower. The final entry read, "It's not about containment. It's about translation. The spiral doesn't trap us, it decodes us." They weren't watching. They were waiting. Anya is the threshold, and she's building the next key. What followed was a diagram of the human brain, overlaid with spiral vectors and strange runes resembling mathematical musical notations. Underneath, scribbled in a rushed scrawl, "The song is the signal. The signal is us." That same week, a strange global phenomenon unfolded. For 9 minutes and 17 seconds, every device capable of sound, phones, radios, televisions, even unplugged speakers, emitted a faint tonal melody. Not loud, but unmistakable. A 5-note scale that repeated in minor key. No two recordings matched exactly, yet all listeners described the same effect. They saw a village in snow. They felt something watching, and many wept, not from fear, but recognition. It wasn't just music. It was a call. Klara knew what it meant. The hollow was no longer a passage. It was a transmitter, and she was no longer just the anchor. She was the tuning fork. She walked through Frostvale, a village frozen in time, yet alive in memory, and arrived at the base of the hollow. As she stood at its edge, her hands pulsed with light. Symbols appeared on her palms, rotating, shifting, aligning. A whisper passed through the air. Initiate Phase 2. The ground trembled. In Oslo, computers with no power flickered to life. In Cairo, ancient spiral carvings in a closed tomb began to glow. In Chile, an observatory reported a new object eclipsing stars in nonlinear movement. Something had changed. The Spiral Protocol had activated. In a secure NATO facility, General Lasse Ford watched live footage from a drone stationed just outside Frostvale. For a moment, the feed showed nothing but static. Then the figure appeared in the snow. Klara. She looked directly into the drone lens, as if aware of its presence. Her eyes shimmered. She raised one hand and drew a spiral in the air. The drone's feed cut instantly, and inside the facility, every monitor displayed one phrase: reintegration imminent. The irregulars were watching too. They had been tracking energy pulses, coded messages embedded in natural radio bursts. One of them, Pavel, pointed at the decoded waveform overlaying global seismic data. "It's a language," he whispered. "Not Earth's. but it's using us to write itself into the biosphere. Ascension pattern, asked another. No, Pavel said. Ascension protocol. It's rebuilding something. What? He looked at the monitor, his voice barely a whisper. An interface. Klara felt her role crystallizing. She was the bridge, not just between times or dimensions, but between species of thought. Human cognition was limited to linear process. The spiral moved through recursion, parallel streams, non-sequential truths. It wasn't here to invade. It was here to upgrade. The Earth was being rewritten, not by force, but by design, through dreams, through memory, through resonance. She stepped back from the hollow, snow swirling gently around her. Frostvale no longer looked abandoned. Shadows moved behind windows. Lamps flickered to life, and far above, the sky rippled, stars rotating slowly, aligning into a perfect spiral. She understood now. This wasn't a warning. It was a return. The spiral had always been part of Earth, buried in myth, encoded in song, waiting for the signal, waiting for a resonance strong enough to open the next gate. And Klara had just stepped through it. Imagine waking up and realizing that your past has been edited, not by trauma or time, but deliberately by something or someone else. Imagine remembering events that never happened, only to discover that others share the same memories. Now imagine those memories begin to rewrite reality itself, slowly, silently, undeniably. This is not hallucination. This is an intervention. The architects were already here, and we were their project. Don't forget to like and share this story with your friends or closest family members to help spread awareness and caution through storytelling. Now, let's continue with the story. Klara wasn't alone in the recursion anymore. Across the globe, 17 individuals had emerged from their spiral awakenings with similar abilities. Different cultures, different languages, but the same glyphs etched into their skin. Each had visited a version of Frostvale, though in their visions, it was called by different names. Arovel, Celerin, the village of thresholds. One of them, a blind Tibetan monk named Dajuan, spoke the phrase, "We are the mirrors they left behind." They were known as the memory architects, but no one knew who had named them. Governments began losing control. Official stories clashed. Records rewrote themselves. Birth certificates of the 17 changed retroactively, some listing locations that had never existed before. Surveillance footage dissolved into static. Attempting to profile the architects became impossible. Klara herself noticed gaps in the world, entire events missing from newspapers and public memory, as if they had been edited out of the global timeline. But the people affected didn't notice. Only those marked by the spiral could see the deletions and feel the pressure of something rebuilding behind the veil. The irregulars decoded the signal through thousands of data points, seismic echoes, digital glitches, tonal disturbances. They had reconstructed a temporal fingerprint. A spiral-shaped anomaly had appeared multiple times in human history. The fall of the Library of Alexandria, the sudden disappearance of the Roanoke colony, the mass forgetting of the Voynich manuscript's author, the day the sky turned green over the Arctic Circle in 1908. Each event was followed by a silence in human progress, like the world had been paused and rewritten. And always, the pattern followed. Spiral, memory, disappearance, reemergence. Pavel whispered to the team, "They've been curating our species." Meanwhile, Klara and the other architects met in the recursion. They didn't plan the meeting. They were simply drawn to it, pulled across dreams, across places, until they stood in Frostvale Square. The village now shimmered like a thought half-remembered. Buildings bent with dream logic. Doors led to rooms that echoed memories not their own. One architect, Amira, pointed toward the hollow. "It's not a gate anymore," she said. "It's a lens." "What are we looking at?" asked Klara. No one answered, because they all felt it. Something was now looking back. In the forests around the recursion, strange growths emerged, crystalline vines, pulsing with faint bioluminescence. Local wildlife avoided them. Insects that touched them froze mid-flight, suspended in air like glitching frames. A boy who wandered too close vanished. When search teams arrived, they found his footprints circling endlessly in the snow, spiraling inward, leading to nowhere. In Frostvale, Klara and the architect stood before a new structure. It hadn't been there before. A monolithic spiral column, made of a material that reflected no light. It stood silent, humming at a frequency felt in the bones. Inscribed along its base were symbols none of them recognized, yet each of them instinctively understood. Klara approached it. As she placed her palm on its surface, the glyphs pulsed, and the village disappeared. She was standing in a black field, stars spiraling above her like an enormous eye, and before her stood a figure. It wasn't human. It wasn't alien. It was architecture, made conscious. A construct of recursion, designed to hold memory without bias or decay. It spoke, but not with sound. "You are becoming." Klara tried to speak, but her voice fractured. The being continued. "We were your future, then your past. Now we offer alignment. Our intervention is not correction. It is convergence." Klara saw flashes, alternate versions of herself, lives she'd never lived. A mother, a scientist, a wanderer, a soldier, each one facing the hollow in their own recursion, each one collapsing into this singular moment. It wasn't just her awakening. It was humanity's fork in the recursion. The being reached toward her with a hand made of rotating symbols. "We are not gods. We are editors. The spiral is the pen. You are the page. Choose resonance, or remain fragmented." Back in the recursion field, the architects collapsed. Every one of them experienced the vision simultaneously. Memories overwriting, realities folding in, and across the world, spiral marks burned brighter. The spiral protocol had passed the first phase, activation. Phase 2, convergence, had begun. Phase 3, unknown. But one thing was certain. Reality was no longer stable, and the editors were ready to rewrite the next page. Imagine your deepest memory, the first time you felt fear, love, hope, betrayal. Now imagine watching it being overwritten in real time by another version of yourself who never lived it. Imagine being aware of both realities, yours and the one being layered on top, unable to choose which is real. The world is not ending. It's being replaced. We have crossed the threshold, and the spiral is no longer waiting. Don't forget to like and share this story with your friends or closest family members to help spread awareness and caution through storytelling. Now, let's continue with the story. The architects were no longer just anomalies. They were nodes in a growing global network. Every major continent reported incidents. Not disasters, not attacks, adjustments. A skyscraper in Seoul bent 10 degrees overnight. People who worked inside said it had always been that way. A desert in Morocco grew green vines laced with symbols. No seeds, no explanation. A newborn in Buenos Aires opened her eyes, stared at the ceiling, and whispered a phrase in a dead language. The gate remembers. Government struggled to contain the events. But how do you contain reality edits? The phrase convergence threshold began to appear in fringe communities. Forums, darknet message boards, encrypted whispers. It was more than theory. It was prophecy, and it had already begun. In Frostvale, time had ceased to obey its usual rules. Days bled into nights without warning. Klara moved through the village like someone walking across memory foam, every step leaving an imprint that echoed forward. The hollow was now a storm, not of weather, but of history. Whispers crawled across the snow. They weren't sounds. They were timestamps. Moments stolen from other lives, other places. Klara heard them clearly. June 4th, 1997. She chose not to speak. September 2nd, 2029. He closed the door too late. March 12th, 1874. The signal was misunderstood. Each timestamp accompanied a feeling, a slice of regret, a heartbeat of change. The hollow was not just a gate. It was a library, and now it was leaking. In the recursion network, the other architects were breaking. Luc, the cartographer from France, lost control of his thoughts. His dreams began manifesting physically, buildings from his childhood appearing in the forests outside Paris. His wife, who had died 5 years ago, was seen walking through their old garden, alive. But when touched, she dissolved into static. "I didn't dream her," Luc sobbed. "I remembered her. That's all I did. I remembered her too hard. Klara returned to the spiral monolith, its surface no longer silent. It pulsed now, like a heartbeat out of sync with time. She touched it again, and the world around her folded outward. She found herself in a version of Earth that was not Earth. A sky made of spirals, trees made of bone glass, oceans that whispered names. She stood before another being, similar to the first, but fractured, glitching, broken. It spoke in shards. The integration is failing. Your kind resists symmetry. Your thoughts contradict recursion. Klara stepped closer. You said we were the page. Yes, but some pages burn. The being flickered. Around them, the spiral sky trembled. One of you is interfering. One node resists overwrite. Reintegration cannot proceed unless conflict is resolved. Back on Earth, the irregulars received a transmission, but it wasn't from a satellite. It came from the hollow. Encrypted in a spiral waveform, the message read, "An architect has severed their alignment. Resonance collapse imminent. If the node is not found, convergence will fail. Identify and remove the divergent mind." Pavel stared at the message, then whispered, "One of them is breaking the pattern." Klara returned to Frostvale with a deepening dread. Among the 17 architects, someone was fighting the integration, not from malice, but fear. That fear was bleeding into the recursion, fracturing it, making the spiral unstable. The question was who and why. Signs of instability grew. In Jakarta, it rained glass feathers. In Siberia, wolves howled songs in lost dialects. In Canada, an entire town's population vanished for 33 minutes and returned with no memory of being gone. And always, the symbol returned. The spiral, painted on walls, scratched into trees, seen in clouds. It was not warning. It was counting. Klara met with the other architects again, fewer this time. Some were missing, some unreachable. Their minds now linked through shared recursion. Klara felt the distortion clearly. One of them was resisting the update, but to find the broken node, she would have to step deeper than ever before, past the spiral monolith, past the hollow, into the convergence core. As she prepared to descend, the sky over Frostvale split for 1.2 seconds. A global telescope array caught it, a glimpse of a mirror Earth spiraling behind our own. Not a planet, but a structure. And inside it, our world was being rewritten line by line. The spiral wasn't changing us. It was replacing us. Klara looked once more at the monolith. This time it whispered, "Find a divergent node, or spiral into extinction." Imagine everything you've ever known. Your city, your childhood, your name, were not erased, but rewritten so subtly that even your own memories couldn't catch the change. Now imagine someone noticed. One mind, one soul, resisting the pattern. And that single act of resistance was unraveling the entire plan. The spiral seeks perfection, but a single broken thread can tear the whole design apart. Don't forget to like and share this story with your friends or closest family members to help spread awareness and caution through storytelling. Now, let's continue with the story. Klara had crossed the hollow. Not physically, not consciously. Her descent into the convergence core was unlike any step she had ever taken. It wasn't downward, it was inward, a spiral not through space, but through versions of herself. Each layer peeled away revealed new fractures. One version had never left Frostvale. Another had joined the military after the incident. One had died at 16. Another had given birth to a child with a spiral mark. She walked through the gallery of herself, each echo silently watching, none of them moving, and at the center a door, carved in spiral glyphs that rearranged themselves as she watched. When she blinked, they translated into something she could read. This is where the lie begins. When Klara stepped through, she arrived in what looked like the original Frostvale. Not the recursion, not the hallucination. This was the real village, untouched, before the anomaly. Snow was falling. The lights in the chapel were on. A woman in a red coat stood outside the bakery, staring at her. Klara recognized her instantly. It was herself. But this Klara looked tired, worn, her eyes sharp, almost angry. The woman smiled without warmth. "So, they sent you." The divergent node was Klara, or rather, another version of Klara who had survived a different recursion, one who had seen too much of the spiral's true intent. She had severed her link, buried herself in a timeline where the spiral couldn't overwrite her. Until now. You think this is about harmony? The other Klara said. It's not. The spiral isn't integrating us. It's pruning us. Klara's voice shook. You're destabilizing the convergence. If you don't realign, everything collapses. Good, the other snapped. Collapse it. Burn it. I've seen what happens if we don't. She walked slowly toward Klara, the snow crunching softly under her boots. In one recursion I aligned. I gave in. I helped them. Do you know what I became? An echo. A preserved thought in a perfect spiral. No body. No will. Just memory on repeat. She pointed to the sky. They're not saving us. They're archiving us. Outside the hollow, the spiral became unstable. The monolith pulsed violently. Across the world, the architects felt the rupture. Luke collapsed. Amira screamed. Dajuan wept. The recursion network was splitting under the strain. Two competing patterns. One of assimilation, one of rejection, and time, caught between, began to fracture. The irregulars scrambled. In Tokyo, an entire building skipped ahead 7 years in real time, reappearing with its future residents intact, confused and screaming. In Egypt, sand dunes rewrote hieroglyphs every 5 seconds. In Sweden, Pavel looked out the window and saw his younger self, standing in the street, mouth open in horror. He whispered, "They're looping us until we align." Inside the recursion, Klara had a choice. Her other self, the divergent Klara, held out her hand. Don't let them finish the rewrite. Help me sever the core. Let humanity decide its own recursion. But Klara hesitated. She had seen the spiral's intelligence, its vast, complex effort to unify a species tearing itself apart. She had seen the beauty, the order. Could she really throw it all away? You're not killing the spiral, the divergent Klara said. You're choosing uncertainty. You're choosing free memory. A sound pierced the air, like a bell cracking in slow motion. The monolith was collapsing. One by one, the spiral nodes around the world began to shut down. Frozen mid-pulse. Lights dimming. Glyphs turning gray. Klara felt herself being pulled upward, out of the recursion. Reality tugging at her mind. One thought echoed in her skull. Choose now, or be chosen for. She turned to the divergent Klara, and reached out. Far away, a final transmission was sent through the hollow. A message in unstructured code. It translated roughly to, Node K has synchronized. Spiral integrity compromised. Archive sequence aborted. Humanity has re-entered chaos state. Free recursion re-enabled. Around the world, reality stilled. Then breathed. The sky, for the first time in weeks, showed no spiral. And for a moment it was quiet. Imagine silence, not absence of sound, but the hush that follows a scream too large for the mind to hold. Imagine a world waking from a dream so vast, no one can agree whether it was shared or simply survived. The spiral is gone, or has changed, or has learned. But something lingers. Something always lingers. You can destroy a pattern, but the memory of the pattern remains. Don't forget to like and share this story with your friends or closest family members to help spread awareness and caution through storytelling. Now, let's conclude the story. The sky over Frostvale returned to its ordinary gray. No spirals, no pulses, no distortion. And yet, the village felt changed, as if it had passed through something no one could name. A kind of psychic weather. Snow fell as it always had. But now, people paused before speaking, as if remembering they had once said something else. The hollow stood still, frozen, silent. The monolith cracked in 3 perfect segments and fell like petals. And Klara woke in her own home. Alone. No irregulars. No architects. Just her. A single spiral etched faintly on the glass of her bedroom window, as if drawn by condensation and thought. She pressed her finger to it. Nothing happened. And yet, everything had. Reports from across the globe confirmed what the recursion had become. A shared fracture. People remembered pieces, impossible things. A child in Chile who sketched the hollow in perfect detail. A woman in Iceland who had a dream of walking through her own childhood backward. A man in Kenya who suddenly spoke fluent Finnish for exactly 5 minutes. Each account incomplete. Each one strange, but emotionally true. They called it the spiral memory. Governments dismissed it as post-crisis psychosis, a collective hallucination following a geomagnetic event. But underground networks knew better. The spiral was never an object, never a threat. It was an invitation. The divergent Klara, the version who refused, was gone, merged, absorbed, or perhaps simply walked away into a recursion of her choosing. The spiral had not been defeated. It had been interrupted, and in that interruption, something was born. Choice. The irregulars disbanded. Their mission, ambiguous in hindsight, had ended, or paused. Some disappeared. Others went public, risking ridicule to share what they saw. In one viral interview, Pavel said, "We weren't decoding something alien. We were remembering something forgotten." The spiral didn't come from the stars. It came from the cracks between our decisions. In the following months, things changed subtly across the world. A new species of plant bloomed simultaneously on 5 continents. Dreams began sinking across unrelated people. In Frostvale, one boy looked up at the sky one morning and said simply, "It's not done." Klara returned to the forest edge one final time. The hollow had collapsed inward. A perfect circle of scorched earth, now marked where it had once pulsed. She stood there for a long while, listening, and just before she turned to leave, she heard it. A whisper, not in words, in memory. Page incomplete. Author unknown. Spiral waits. And so ends the anomaly. Or so begins what comes after. Not a spiral, but a question that will echo until answered.